This is Catholic Forum. I'm Bob Krebs, and my guest on today's program is the Delegate for Religious for the Diocese of Wilmington, Sister Ann David Strohminger. Sister, welcome back to the program. We're glad to have you on here. You're always a joy to have on the program because you have pretty much, you know what's going on in our diocese. You know what's going on with the religious community, and a lot of people will be kind of surprised at how many religious men and women we have working in our diocese.
Yes.
So we're going to be talking about that, and especially we're going to be talking about your recent trip to the Vatican. You just got back a few days ago, correct?
Well, it's been a week,
Okay.
a whole week.
So yeah, you've recovered from your jet lag
Yes.
and everything. So we're going to talk about that a lot this morning. But before we do, what does the Delegate for Religious do in a diocese?
The Delegate for Religious is the liaison for the bishop. So she communicates to the people what the bishop desires, and she communicates back from the religious priest brothers and sisters anything that the bishop needs to know.
Right. So you're that bridge between the men and women religious of the diocese and Bishop Koenig.
That's right.
And so how many religious are working in our diocese? I would think most people know about the one or two or three who might be working in their parish, or in their ministry, whatever, but they don't really know overall numbers. So share those
We
numbers
have
with us.
150 religious sisters.
Wow.
We have 4 religious brothers, and we have about 70 priests, religious
Wow.
priests.
And I would think most of those priests would be oblates of St. Francis de
Yes,
Sales.
that's absolutely right.
And the same way with the brothers, or not.
No, we have 2 religious brothers that are oblates.
Right.
One is a Norbertine, and one is a Franciscan.
Okay, great, awesome. And they work in all sorts of ministries.
That's right.
Parish ministries, teaching.
Catholic Charities, working with a lot of sisters, I will say, are volunteer age just because many of them are over 80 years old. So they're in volunteer capacities in parishes. They may be helping with the ministry of caring, serving the needs of the people. People are very active. So I think we need to think beyond the parameters of just school today
Right.
and hospital.
Sure, yeah. It's funny how you use the term they're of volunteer age, not they're of retirement age.
Yes.
Because I guess the religious, they don't retire, they just volunteer.
Yes. I say to people, we're in the eternal life program. So.
That's great. That's awesome. Speaking of Catholic Charities, I think on next week's program we'll have Sister Kathy Flood
Right.
on the program, and she'll be talking about her work at Catholic Charities.
Right.
And she's a sister of St. Francis of Philadelphia, like you, and you guys are roommates too. Right?
That's right.
Housemates
That's
or
right.
whatever,
We
yeah.
live together.
Yeah.
And Sister Kathy, I'll say, is new again to the diocese. She used to live here many years ago. So she's a vocation from this diocese.
Yeah, that's awesome. So make sure you listen to next week's program as well. We could probably just chat about the religious of our diocese all day, but let's get to why we're here today to talk about your recent trip to Rome. It was to attend meetings. What was the purpose of these meetings, Sister?
Well, I'm on the executive board of the National Conference for Vicars for Religious in the United States. And every 5 years, we are called to go to the Vatican to give a report to the department, or they call it the Dicastery, for Consecrated Life. Well, we were supposed to go in 2020, and as we all know, everything got canceled, and finally this was the year that they were able to receive us. So on March 25th, 6 of us went over to Rome, and our primary reason was to go meet with Consecrated Life. So would you like me to share with you a little of who was there?
Yeah,
and
sure, please do. Yeah.
Okay. We had 2 American sisters, Sister Kelly, Sister Lorraine, who is a Little Sister of the Poor. So they represent the English-speaking congregations, and we were there with Cardinal Davies, who is Brazilian, and he is the director of Consecrated Life. Father Orlando, who is head of the legal and disciplinary services, and one of the women who is in charge of consecrated virgins, hermits, and secular institutes. So what we did was we gave really a 7-year report of the work we have done in the United States. And we had the opportunity to ask questions. So the Cardinal was so hospitable, as they all were. And he understood religious life. He was not a religious priest himself, but he talked about our roles in the church and the evolution of religious life, our call to bring our charisms to community, and he also understood the cultural piece of, I'll say, the United States becoming more individualistic and our need to live in relationship with one another. So many of the questions we took questions about monastic communities, the evolving secular institutes, and some of the issues that are there. I will tell you, one of the questions that I was asked to bring up, it was my turn to ask the question, but I said to him, what we are finding in the United States among congregations of women and men is the question of gender identity, is that people are defining themselves as gender binary, gender fluid, transgendered, and we wanted their input as to looking at this in religious life. Do you have any advice?
That was a big question.
It was a big question.
What was the big answer?
The big answer was, first of all, he smiled and he says, well, that's very concrete. And he said, I'm glad you brought the question forward.
Yeah.
He said, it's an evolving question that we need to look at. Right. And he went back to, he didn't give a yes or a no answer, but God continues to call us, and we need to be open to who God is calling us to. Right. So, and you could see that he was also trying to understand the questions that we are all facing today in the world to understand this.
And that's not just a question for the religious communities, but it's the church in general.
It's the church.
And we found that out to be the case when we did our synodal, speaking sessions and so forth, that's something that's on everybody's mind. How do we as a church serve those children of God who identify as transgender and some of those other challenges that we face? Interesting. So you were asking questions of the Cardinal, and the Cardinal was asking questions of you, and was there a written report also?
Yes, we sent a written report over before we went. The questions that we had, we weren't part of that, but he wanted to know. One of the things he was concerned about is the decreasing number of religious that are in the United States. Right. And we had a conversation about the changing roles of religious, of not that the charism or the need for religious is decreasing, but women in the world have changed so much, and opportunities for them. Their vision of church and spirituality look different. And there was concern for a decreasing number and viability of people who give so much to the world and have helped change it.
Sure, absolutely. And were there any solutions offered?
No solutions offered. But he wrote down everything we said. We had a translator there, and he he was very engaging, and I mean, he came to each person and introduced himself, said goodbye at the end of the
Session.
the session, and it was just it. I felt very welcomed.
And heard.
Yes, and heard.
And cared for. Yeah.
Yes.
That's very, very important.
And one of the things I also had the opportunity after the meeting was to spend some time with, let me find her name. Sorry about that.
That's quite all right.
I'm like trying to.
While you're doing that, I'll reintroduce you. My guest today on Catholic Forum is Sister Ann Strohminger. She's the delegate for religious for the Diocese of Wilmington, and we're talking about her recent visit to Rome, representing vicars for religious from across our country.
Yes.
So go ahead.
Thank you. One of the opportunities I had was to meet with Serenella de Cinque, and she is in charge of consecrated virgins and hermits, and to talk about what is the role of consecrated virgins, the formation program. It's something that we have just initially walked into
Right.
in this diocese.
Exactly, yeah.
And she was very inspiring, so I would say she gave a lot of information that was helpful as we go forward.
That's great.
Thank
So what else did you do while you were over there?
Well,
Is that
we
the
went-
end of your
No.
official business?
No.
There was more. That was just the beginning.
We went to the Dicastery for the synod,
Oh, okay.
and we met with Sister Natalie Beckhart, who is a Canadian sister and who has worked on the synod. So, I have to tell you, every place we went, we heard about the synodal process. So the synodal process isn't something that just happened last year. It is to be continuing throughout the church, and Pope Francis wants us to do this. So that came up at every session, and the need to discern together, the need to talk with one another, and so very hopeful, very, very hopeful.
And you were involved with the
Yes.
synodal process here in our diocese, so that was probably some really good things for you
Yes.
to hear as well.
And then we went to the Union of International Superiors General. What that really means is all of the major superiors, the Reverend Mothers, we used to call them, in the world come under this. Now, that is not a Vatican based department. It's just based in Rome.
Gotcha.
So we got to meet with the executive director, who was an Irish sister. So one of the things that she told us that they are really working forward on is the focus on the vulnerable. The vulnerable, who are the vulnerable people in the world that need care and compassion and mercy. So she was delightful.
Yeah, I can imagine. 100 years ago, 50 years ago, the vulnerable people in the United States, might have been the Irish immigrants or the Italian immigrants who needed a Catholic education. That's not the case anymore. Now it's
Yes.
it's other people.
That's
it's the
right.
homeless. It's the immigrant.
Right.
As things change, as needs change, the missions of the religious change as well to meet those needs. Yeah. So, what was your big takeaway from your trip?
The faith of the people. There were so many pilgrims in Rome that you look around and why do all these people gather here? And really, it was very crowded. So it's strong, it's relevant, and that was one of the things I took. And I felt encouraged by all of the people that we met, that we're all in this together, and trying to deliver the gospel message to people. So I didn't feel like I was just listened to because we went over there.
Right.
Do you know,
Yeah.
sometimes you go to meetings. It was a dialogue, and they were very grateful to hear what was happening in the United States. So,
Yeah, good.
hope.
Did you see the Pope?
We did. And people were concerned because they heard he went to the hospital.
Right, that was about the same time.
It
Yeah,
was
that
the exact same day.
Yeah.
He did the audience in the morning, and he went to the hospital in the afternoon.
Wow. And you were at that audience.
Yes.
And did he seem ill or?
I said, being a nurse, his
Yeah.
face looked a little puffy. So anyway,
So you diagnosed right?
I did,
right
of
away.
course. So, but he did the Pope Mobile. He spoke to everybody. He blessed everyone. The other thing that I thought was an interesting take is that he has a prayer that he says, but he says it in many languages. So on the big TV screens, you see the people who are interpreting the languages.
Right.
Every one of them were women. So
Yeah, that's
that
pretty
was
good.
a takeaway.
Yeah, that's a takeaway for sure. What
Yeah.
will you remember the most from your trip, do you think?
Oh my. I mean, it was humbling, it was a blessing. So besides going to these meetings, which is an opportunity of a lifetime, the food,
The wine.
the wine, the churches we went
Oh,
to.
beautiful, yeah.
I had the opportunity to go to Assisi after
Oh,
that for
awesome.
a week. So being a Franciscan,
Yeah, it's,
it was great. Well, I was there for Holy Week.
oh, that's wonderful.
So on Palm Sunday, all of the people gathered in the piazza, and the bishop was there, and we gathered holding, some people held palm branches, but all of the people held olive branches because olive trees are in great abundance there. And then we walked probably about a half a mile to the Basilica of San Rufino, straight uphill, and we had the Palm Sunday liturgy. I was there for the Chrism Mass in Assisi,
Wow.
and then I went on my way back. In Holy Thursday, I was in Rome, and I went to St. John Lateran. Now, the Basilica of St. John Lateran is the official basilica for Rome. So that's so.
For the Archdiocese of Rome. Right,
Yes,
right,
and it has a very Franciscan heritage because that's where Francis went to meet the Pope to ask if he could live his rule. So there is a huge statue of St. Francis in front of St. John Lateran, and the story says he's holding up the church. So we can just take from that what we want.
You can tell you're a true Franciscan,
Yeah.
sister.
So
So what are the next steps following this meeting in Rome? Did they send you back with a list of things to do, or did they call you to solidarity, or what?
just to continue to live the charism and the prophetic message that religious life witnesses. And so that was really what we were given. And I'm going to say to you, I felt very much a part of the church in that meeting with Cardinal Davies. We're all in this together.
Right.
The laity, the religious, the clergy. It is really the church that God calls us to live today. So that was the hope that I bring back.
That's wonderful. What do you think the future for the religious in our country? What does it look like?
I think religious life will always have a place in our country. It will not look like it has looked in the last 100 years with all of the religious sisters and priests and brothers teaching in school. I think we are at a place right now where we are all trying to look at what is evolving. We don't know what's all evolving, but I would say every religious congregation in the United States is trying to be true to the vision that God calls forth in all of us. So, and I guess that's the best place we can all be. It's like this diocese. Doesn't look like it did 100 years ago,
For sure.
but we are praying together to see how can we best serve the people of God. And, yep.
On that, Sister Ann David Strohminger, thanks so much for being with us today on Catholic Forum.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.